Hey everyone, welcome back to Built to Last. We're back with the same set of CEOs from the last episode. So we have Srey from Avenue, we have Jen from Uservoice, we have Jess from Polymer, and we have Nick from Convox. So I think today our focus is probably going to be around go to market and what go to market strategies have been looking like at your respective companies. If there's been any sort of channels that you guys have found have been really helpful for you guys, or any sort of tactics that you've thought have been particularly valuable. And just given the fact that everything's sort of changing right now, just how, if at all, you've sort of started to integrate AI into that strategy. So maybe to start us off first, what does go to market look like today at your companies?
I'll be happy to go first. So, I mean, Convox, we do a pretty classic, product-led growth, self-serve sign up, sort of deploy your app and get going with a good onboarding sequence. Mix in, a variety of different outbound motions sort of at the same time when we're going to market with any particular thing. We are in the process of doing a layered in like sales assisted, which is targeted outbound with LinkedIn. It's really starting to serve like our demo path, and that's probably what we're transitioning towards right now, is attempting to use really with AI to sort of help us fill some of like the person gaps in what can help with a sales assisted motion, because we can use agents to help do a lot of the filtering and initial outbound handing off to us when we have targeted leads and sort of do that. For the most part, I would say growth, the classic sort of pipeline is very saturated with the blind outbound stuff. I don't really see a lot of motion there going with AI just because of the saturation point. And so we're really trying to lead towards, and it's, product specific. Convox really does have a good targets in a sales assisted layer. And so trying to sort of provision that up at the same time is really what we're trying to reach with AI forward, and seeing what different tools and automations really work. Because I think that's the biggest thing with AI, is that you can go anywhere with it. And some people are doing it well and some people are not doing it well. And I think you have to have the right amount of human touches in there, because people are really starting to see through the blatant AI. Like the AI terminology is becoming its own dictionary that people are fluent in these days. That if you work with AI on any given basis, it's so obvious to me the second I see some AI slop or just anything that's AI generated. It's phraseology, it's little things that I think the real like next wave of AI is like really taking it as a tool and not just like the blast tool, and trying to use it more precision with human integrations.
Yeah, I think a shotgun approach has been happening for a lot of different companies right now. And I think everyone is sort of starting to meme on the different that AI loves to use. Like, it's not this, it's that.
I made it so easy. Right when everyone figured out that you could run waterfalls and generate personalized messages, we did it, and we were having really, really high read rates. And then it seemed like the drop off was almost immediate. We were getting 13 to 16% read reply. It was going pretty well. And then it went to sub 1% in a matter of a week. So I don't know if the trend happened that quickly or the right post went viral and people started to pick up on it. The human in the loop factor is what's going to be important. And I think that's with GTM and utilizing AI, the BS factor is starting to be very, very read between. And so you're going to have strong human in the loop touches. And I think that's really where strong go to market motion is going to be, utilizing AI the most.
Yeah, I think we're in this sort of awkward phase where you're expected to use AI, but the mention or the any explicit showing of AI feels like it really harms your credibility. Because it's like, yes, of course you should be using it to generate and move at a faster speed, but at the same time, if you're just using that shotgun approach, like I mentioned, it shows and then it harms trust inherently. Jess, feel free. Do you have something?
Polymer is quite small, so for our go-to-market, I think getting our infrastructure in place is important. Attribution, tracking. So to start with, it's great to have a small field on your form that says, "Where did you hear about us?" A small free text form, because a lot of smaller companies especially struggle with attribution, and that is helpful. Most of our signups come from organic referrals. Of course, that's not scalable, but it's helpful to know that is happening. So on the targeted side, we are doing, just like Nick said, the playbook, running some targeted cold outreach across different audience segments. We are keeping Google ads running, but for us, pretty small right now, just to keep the algorithm learning, since we can't really compete with larger companies right now in that space. But also, I think having a social presence, I think that's actually quite important right now. So LinkedIn, especially, it's proven that if you use your personal profile in order to handle that, then you're going to get a lot more, well, two things. That LinkedIn algorithm will definitely want to show it more. And also your network will be more interested in you as a person, and just people are more interesting than companies. So that's one avenue that I've been exploring. I had been posting for Polymer for years, and it is definitely true that posting on the personal profile instead gets a lot more views, and later you can utilize that by promoting it as ads. And I don't know if it's one of those things that's going to become so overdone in like 3 months that nobody does it anymore, but I think that right now it can be a very effective channel, and we're going to have a motion soon that's going to take advantage of that. But as Nick was saying, targeted is definitely the way to go. More and more, it's showing that your leads or your source, wherever you get that, is going to create the most valuable ROI. The playbook isn't really, depending on the size of your company, maybe, but not like a huge volume campaign. Huge volume campaigns still work, but you do have to have a very, very large volume in order to see return on that. And just another comment, I try to get information on good cold email marketing practices. And yes, everybody is saying that doing the customized intros just isn't working because people know that you didn't do it. So your best strategy is really just to make sure that you target, like in the first few sentences, you target their pain point, like something they're actually looking for. Like, can you solve a problem they have? Right. So I think that cold email is just never that ideal, but it definitely still works. So it's something to use. And then, right, I was going to say, other things in go to market, though, of course, is when leads come in, activating them, reaching out to them, I think is another avenue there to make sure you reach out. And I think for a small company like Polymer, I can actually do that right now. They say about small companies is that you can do things at the beginning that won't scale later, but I can actually write personalized. And I try to be like, dude, I am actually writing this. I am not AI, I promise. That is the only catch there. It used to be obvious it wasn't going to be AI, but now it's almost like you wonder if it's going to work because everybody might believe it's AI, even if you put in the work to go actually learn about, the people signing up. Yeah.
I'm actually really interested in Shrey. I know you come from a marketing background, and I know Avenue has had a few things that have been successful in the past for you guys. And given the fact that Avenue also sort of exists as a growth engine for, I don't know the difference between real estate agents and realtors, so apologies for that. But was hoping to get sort of your take on that.
Yeah. So to answer most of the question, realtors are just real estate agents who basically pay this company to call themselves realtors. That's kind of a cartel type thing. So anyway, you have to take like an exam to call yourself a licensed realtor. So our approach is, so we have a couple of challenges, which are, one, we have a price sensitive customer. So you mentioned real estate agents. We go after like individual agents right now. So this is a luxury, our product is in some ways a luxury for them, and they're individuals, so the money's coming out of their pocket as opposed to kind of a more traditional B2B. So if they take that into account, and also currently or historically, our product has a fairly low gross margin. There's a bit of labor intensiveness to delivering it. So we have been really taking a close eye at the unit economics of what has driven channels. And I think what we've learned is right now, most anything that we do that costs money or costs a lot of labor cannot work from kind of the unit economic, the LTV to CAC that we want to look at. Nick touched on this. What we have been pushing on is more of a product-led growth that has a built-in virality to it, which happens to be a good fit for our product. The product-led growth, we are pushing on a free tier that, as far as we've seen, would be the best offer for our customers in the market. There's not a lot of good free offerings, so that should be compelling. Obviously, we have to manage our costs there, but then the real key is that the free offering has Avenue branding kind of littered throughout it. What we are hoping for is that by having a really compelling free offering, that's going to drive a lot of brand awareness, and then we're going to optimize that funnel. So for example, in the domain, you would see the Avenue domain if you're on the free tier. So it'd be like realtor name or real estate agent name dot Avenue. And then also we've put in a couple of different widgets and stuff on a free website. And then we can get into optimizing that flow. So like, what's the language we use on the widget? What's the language we use on the footer? When you click on that, basically go to, and then there's probably things we can do to incentivize both sides of the loop a little bit. So that's kind of the direction we're going to want to go in. But I think for now, it's given the nature of our product and our customer, we think building those virality loops are going to be really important. So that's what the data has told us. Obviously, there's other things we can do from a product perspective and a pricing perspective to try and increase our gross margin, maybe focus in on a higher willingness to pay customer. But for now, with our current product, with our current pricing, with our current market, we think the PLG loop is the way to go. All very new. So we're still waiting on results. But the data point that drove all this is that historically, referrals have been our top and really only profitable acquisition channel. So this is a way to double down on that.
I just realized, and maybe we should have started the episode discussing this as well, just so that way people had context for like not just the companies that you guys are with, but specifically what your product is doing so they can kind of understand why some go-to-market strategies may apply to.
So Convox is a PaaS SaaS that is primarily an infrastructure provider. We sit at the base layer of our customers' infrastructure stack and effectively manage everything from the EC2 instance out to their EIPs. It's the end-to-end infrastructure stack and making it so that all our customers have to do is worry about their code and deploy. And where that really ties into our GTM motion is that developers don't like being sold to. So for our dev and engineering audience, we certainly have to have this PLG self-service sort of motion that they can get in and try it themselves. But at the same time, and this is really where we're sort of deferring to the sales assisted motion, is that your stakeholders, even the startup sort of teams, not necessarily either what speaks to them. A lot of times that person that needs to come in and evaluate whether or not they're going to be a buyer of your product is outside of that team. And that person will have no clue what they're doing inside of Convox to a certain extent because it is a sort of base layer technical product. And so that's really where we have to have kind of two diverging aspects to our overall GTM motion because there's not a one size fits all for who we need to be approaching as potential customers.
Polymer is a SaaS. It's an applicant tracking system. It also provides job boards, a careers page. It's hiring made simple, but its goal right now is aimed, our ICP is basically growing teams, is how I think of it myself. So we are looking at customers right now who are not necessarily going to have a recruiter, or they might have just brought on a recruiter for the first time. So this does also impact our marketing in terms of especially finding the correct audience. We're deliberately set up so that it's really easy to get started. There's not a lot of overhead when you sign up and start Polymer. And that's what a lot of these companies need because, as I said, they don't necessarily have somebody who's doing HR, who's doing recruiting. It might be the engineering manager or the CTO or the CEO or the founder who is going to be doing this. And, this is going to be one of a million things they're working on. So that is something we lean into. And the other thing is we have to be somewhat targeting in terms of looking for companies that are going to be at a place of growth. They're ready to hire, in other words. Not everybody is necessarily at the place. So that does influence GTM when we're doing our targeted outreach in terms of finding the best leads and prospects.
Avenue focuses on real estate agents. What we offer them is marketing solutions to help them stand out, websites, like premium look and feel websites that are integrated with their listing data is really the core of what we have, as well as other lead generation type activities like email, social media, and paid advertising. And the one thing that we do that is a little bit unique is a lot of full service, almost like agency type support, especially because a lot of our target market is not very tech savvy and a lot of them are very busy. So kind of that willingness and ability to do it for them is something that our customers really appreciate in us.
I guess it's my turn. So Uservoice is in its current format a customer intelligence platform. It's been many things over the course of its life, but at the core, the asset is qualitative feedback from your customers at scale. Uservoice in its original iteration leaned into help desk support sorts of tools, and then it became pretty quickly evident that this asset that you're building in terms of this volume of feedback has high value to other disciplines. So the current iteration of the product has focused more on product managers, product management teams, really at that kind of individual contributor level more, and taking insights and turning them into roadmaps. So I think the bigger opportunity that we're seeing is that the voice of your customer, that opportunity to get that direct from them understanding of what's high value, where the pain points are, where you could invest, really goes beyond just product roadmaps. So we're trying to take this source of information, begin to integrate with other sources of information our customers have, Zendesk, Gong, things like that, and really become this one-stop shop to really understand at a meaningful human level what your customers need, what they want. And then from that, we're beginning to really invest in pulling out themes, ideas, insights, opportunities you might have overlooked, even hidden ICPs in your information and cohorts of data that you might not have seen, the evolution of your customers. So there's a lot of interesting work that we do with marrying technology and AI with this very human core asset at the heart of it, which is people's thoughts and feelings about interacting with your business. So I think one of the struggles in talking about go-to-market with Uservoice is because it has been so many things over time, and inheriting it now when we're really moving into this emphasis on voice of the customer, customer intelligence, this broader appeal outside of product is we're really restarting the go-to-market function from scratch in a lot of ways. The company itself had kind of given up a little bit, and I guess given up is a strong word, but given up on marketing, on go-to-market as kind of like an outbound investment. So in some ways, it's an archaeological dig through the past, through layers of the past, to kind of find out what we used to talk to our customers about, what used to get them excited, how we used to kind of present ourselves. So it's kind of interesting because it's like, in many ways, Uservoice is not a startup anymore. It's a 15-year-old company. It just happens to be smaller than it has been at different periods in time. And so, but we are startup-like in that it's really creating go-to-market from scratch at the moment for a company that is well established. So it's an odd sort of place to be in, and it's kind of a slow feeling around in the dark for us right now to figure out how we get our feet under us to kind of create that engine again. So I think for us, it's less a story about the things that we've discovered so far that are working great as it is, oh my goodness, where do we start and what's going to even get any amount of traction at the moment.
I can imagine with also restarting that go-to-market strategy for Uservoice, there's also just a lot of change happening, not just internally within the company, but also externally with just how AI has changed the landscape for what's effective and what isn't anymore. I think some channels have probably evolved to be very effective, and then some probably less so. So maybe this is a question for everyone. Have you guys seen any channels that historically performed really well that you're now starting to see aren't as effective as they used to be, or the inverse where you're like, normally we wouldn't have paid any attention to this, but now this is actually starting to um, seem like this is the direction that things are moving in?
I'll start off by saying I think Google Ads is just becoming less and less of a viable place to dump your money. I think with people using AI to search, I think the spend that we have on Google Ads, and maybe it's the size of Convox and my budget to ads, that I get very little out of it, and we are a hair away from reallocating the entire ads budget to something more effective. I think largely people are kind of sick of being sold to. And I think it may be driven by this wave of AI. I'm part of the problem. We started this blind outbound that was doing the same thing that I'm complaining about. But we have this sort of numb feeling to how many emails that I have in my inbox that are talking about my stack and how this SaaS is going to solve all my problems. And it's just like, I don't even look at it anymore. Kind of the same way where you scroll past the first few Google searches that are sponsored because it's just like, I want to get to something that's real and meaty. And I think that coupled with AI suggesting things and people clicking right out of their AI context as opposed to going to Google anymore is really just making ads. If you're going for strictly click ads, there may be something more too if your product is something that serves well inside of the video ad space and some of those different mediums that are more like cross-platform. I know Google does a lot of that stuff, but if you're going for straight click ads, I have seen that as just being such a diminished angle at this point that we're about to just pull out of it and reallocate those funds elsewhere.
Yeah, I think people think they don't like advertising. I'd say society doesn't like advertising. I don't actually, I would say that's not true entirely, but people don't like the idea of being advertised to. For example, when Apple started asking you if you wanted to pass on cookies or not, the majority of people say no, even though you just get a worse experience because they get all sorts of random ads and they're like, oh, why is it showing up? Whereas I think most people, if you show them, just like if you were able to perfectly A/B test, they would like the experience where they allowed cookies and got content that's used to them. So I think advertising, quote unquote, still works. I think the form of it changes over time. I think the funny thing I do is like the first pop-up ad ever had 100% click through because it was like 1993 and someone was like, oh wow, this is amazing. And then things change over there. I'll go on a little tangent, but I think this is a funny story where I think it was Yahoo was trying to sell ad spots to, I think it was like Ford or some big brand, and they were doing a live demo, and then like a NSFW style ad popped up on their website. They're like, oh hell no. And then so that was kind of when the pop-up blocker started becoming a thing, and there started becoming a lot of restriction on that. But point is, I think there's this concept called the law of shitty click-throughs where everything degrades over time as people get used to it. About 10 years ago, if you worked with any YouTuber and got them to sponsor your product, you would right away just get this giant boom. And now, like Nick was alluding to, people are used to it. Now people just skip past the ads. Now you
You're
have to
quick to
literally
skip
say,
past the NordVPN, the
yep.
HelloFresh.
Also, now
Um,
you have to put a little tag saying there's an
yeah,
ad in this.
sponsor.
So basically, as things show up, then they'll degrade over time. So I think is what is working today. I mean, I think depending on your market, like MCPs are kind of like a new acquisition channel. That's like a new way of doing ads. Probably in, I would say by the end of the year, there's gonna be marketplaces for MCPs and connectors that'll let you sponsor your connector, and then that's going to be something that's probably going to work for a while, and then it'll degrade. So I didn't answer your question, but I think that the it's more about the nature of what happens to these channels, and I think based on your audience, you kind of have to figure out what they're not sick of, because I think probably if you're in B2B tech, those buyers are a lot more sophisticated than if you're selling into a more kind of like for example, Avenue real estate agents are a little bit of the laggards on the adoption curve. So we have a little more time. But no offense to any agents out there, like my mom.
If they're watching this, they're ahead of the game, so
Yeah,
you're good.
what's a podcast?
Yeah.
You might say.
Of
You mentioned MCPs and connectors, and I think that is actually a really interesting avenue because one of the things that I've been thinking about is MCPs sort of rely on you, first off, like knowing what it is, and like ideally you having an existing relationship with that product. So, how do you imagine in the future the potential where people are looking at MCPs and yeah, maybe certain ones are suggested? Do you imagine that like onboarding flows would become apparent there?
I think this is a better question for the engineers on the call. I do think that's where it goes back to your audience. If your audience is not tech savvy, then even if you could build a repo, make it open source, do really good SEO on GitHub. So if you type in a long tail search, it shows up. But if your audience doesn't know what to do with it, then it's not going to be very effective. But then you might want to create a little wrapper on top or just like a little simple UI, and then it's behind it. I don't know. So I think the point is, I think with any GTM, I think the most important thing is understand your audience and adapt to them.
you said the word that is my opinion of most MCP. An MCP has to be worth its weight in tokens, and that's what people. I think there was this initial giant surge of MCPs, and then as soon as people realized that for the most part they don't serve anything other than to pollute your token pool and to just cost you more money because it's going to get injected. Like that MCP is going with every single sub agent, every single everything, and it's just more tokens. And so people went and added 6 MCPs and they were all blown away by it. And then they realized that their background agents weren't working and everything else was getting bloated. So now everyone turns off their MCPs. And so now everyone's only looking for highly effective MCPs. So I think MCPs are going in this sort of rocking boat sort of area. I keep very minimal MCPs personally. If I'm using an MCP, it's usually 1 or 2 tops, and it's per project, per window, per space. And so I think that inherently in and of itself makes them more of a surgical instrument than this widespread sort of like, I don't know if MCP marketplaces are going to take off because I don't see it being something that you want to have 100 of installed. You're probably going to want to have a very select few that you're using in targeted project bound spaces. And really, I think if you're like from a product standpoint, if you're going to launch an MCP, it needs to be more than just a wrapper, like more than just an advanced prompt tool. And that's what a lot of them sort of in the race just to be able to say we have an MCP kind of turned into. And so for a lot of the times, I've been steering away from MCPs. I think the industry is kind of in a bit of a wobble spot with it, where they're unsure. And I think it's going to end up being something a little bit different. I think it'll be a MCP adjacent, but it'll have some relative differences, and we'll call it something different.
Well, there is a difference there, though, of course, that we haven't mentioned. The connectors versus the MCPs, they may be similar, but one of them is in, say, ChatGPT's marketplace. That's an entirely different pool of people. Convex does have a very technical customer base, so that's likely going to be very true. The people using Convox, as Nick is talking about, but for other companies, I'm definitely going to be looking into the connectors like ChatGPT and see if Claude has anything available on the web, because for a non-technical audience, you know, there are two things. First of all, if they're just looking through there, I mean, especially it's just a little bit of brand visibility, right? Like, who has a connector with ChatGPT? If you get in there, which I say that, of course, it requires a little more speed, but I mean, I think it could provide brand visibility. I think it's definitely something to look at. I don't know how quickly it's going to become bloated, and as was mentioned, could be sponsored. And then, of course, you end up in the same place you were before, which is at the bottom of the line, depending on your budget. But still, you know, I think it is something to look at in terms of audiences who have no idea, and you can just still make it a wrapper. They have no idea it's a wrapper. They don't even know what that means. Plus, it is valuable to them to be able to go into something they use on a regular basis, whether that's Cloud Web or ChatGPT, and be able to kit with the apps they use. So, I mean, that is actual value. And, you know, that's not going to necessarily, I don't know what that looks like technically in terms of taking up, I know what it looks like in terms of taking up tokens, but I don't know what that looks like in terms of space, you know, for them on the web. I don't know if that's going to be an issue. So that's a different audience than Nick's talking about, though.
I definitely agree with you there.
I think both those are great points. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say that I do think way more B2B and connector side things. If you have a consumer, like a person side application, that is a perfect idea. And that is the application point, because that's people acting more in web consoles and things like that. So yes, I will cede all of your points. That is not what I was referencing.
Yeah. But I think this is a good example of like the audience match, where if Nick tried to do this strategy, it would basically be like using a pop-up ad for your audience and be like, why would I use this wrapper that's just going to cost a lot of money on the back end, not accomplish anything? But if I was the target audience, that's what I'm constantly looking for, like these open source repos that probably use all my tokens, which is why I run out so fast, and most of them end up sucking. But it's still one of the first things I do is look for this work that someone else has done, and it's basically a wrapper, but it's a wrapper around something that I wouldn't be able to do myself. So I think, yeah, it just goes back to your audience, like what Jess was saying.
Yeah. I mean, our number one requested item right now, can you guess what it is from our customers incoming? Starts with an M, ends with an SP, MCP server. Sorry, that joke fell flat. But like, it's highly requested. Like, our most engaged people who are trying desperately to use our product, which is in need of so much help, are like, I love it. I love the info. Just like, please put it where I'm working. Put it where I'm working. That's all I need. I don't know how to describe it to you better. Just, I want this. So like, that's become like the top of the heap of like things that people are coming in to request. So I think it's like, I agree with you, Srey. Like, the audience, my audience is like semi-technical, but also like more than that, they just like need to be able to get at what they need and like move quickly and make decisions and not lose their budgets and all of that good stuff. So I think, Nick, I was laughing because like Kurt basically has like given treatises on everything that you were just saying every time I talk to him. So I think it is like, yeah, it's very audience dependent, but like I kind of agree, you know, it feels a little bit unsustainable. I think that like rocking boat thing is kind of a good analogy, because it's like, how much can these things like bloat and scale and cost before like even the non-technical people kind of don't get the use of them.
Kurt just wants you to put up an API, doesn't he? That's what you should do.
Yes. But like this kind of like really desperate fever pitch request for like these kinds of things from us feels like it is kind of like the fever pitch of like, please just like somehow put this in my workflow somewhere in a way that doesn't feel inaccessible to me. And so like that is what I take from that feedback, but we're also gonna do it anyway.
I think
Yeah.
we're in a weird state right now too, where with the MCPs, like you mentioned, Shrey, some of them burn a bunch of tokens. And I know Jess, I'm putting you on the spot here. Jess used this wonderful analogy one time where it kind of feels like gambling nowadays, where you're like, I'm gonna put a bunch of tokens in and I hope that output is great. And it's kind of like you don't know until it's actually there and you receive that output. But when you do get output that is really valuable, it kind of makes it all worth it. And I think it is starting to be a lot of like validating what's effective and what isn't.
That's called intermittent rewards to keep you hooked.
I know. We're like dogs starving at
Literally
the
how
bell.
gambling works. But
I want
hopefully,
to be.
I was
Sorry.
gonna say, hopefully AI won't stay that way. Hopefully the consistency of good outputs will increase versus not so helpful outputs.
We're apparently about to get Mythos. Like that's what they've been saying.
On that fun note, every time we end this call, it ends with AI, but I think we're at time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it. And a very big thank you to all of our CEOs who participated in this call who had the time to chat with me about these different things and chat with the world about these different things. It's much appreciated. So thank you
See ya.
guys.
Bye.